Again, hello everyone. My name is Alexander Kolkatronis. I'm the director of the Naugatuck Valley Project and of our Community Land Trust arm. So today we'll be having a conversation and presentation from Brenda Torpy uh, to first get into some housekeeping items to everyone. There were two previous webinars that we conducted. On December 11th, 2025, we did a Community Land Trust 101 webinar with Jason Webb from Grounded Solutions Network. Please look to that in the on social media and links to the videos on the Housing Collective YouTube. Uh, Potentially, I don't know if the YouTube links could be posted here in the chat as well, but yes, there they are. Please look at the links there and you'll find the recording. The second webinar that was conducted was about a month ago as well, January 14th, 2025. We did this webinar, 2026, I'm sorry. That was a webinar on Community Land Trust of Connecticut, which featured the Salisbury Housing Trust, the Southeast Connecticut Community Land Trust, and MVP Naugatuck Valley Project, talking about the different models for community land trusts around the state of Connecticut. Another item I'd like to bring up here is the Salisbury Community Land Trust Talk and Tour that's coming up on Thursday, February 26th. Please look to the link in your chat. So this will be an in-person event, talk and tour on the Salisbury Community Land Trust, Salisbury Housing Trust. Again, Thursday, February 26th. I believe 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. is the listed time you will see, and register there at the link at the Eventbrite. This will be very helpful for the logistics of the event. Next, we'll have another webinar coming up. We spoke for those of you who've been with us in prior webinars. Originally, this was slated as a three-part webinar, but we spoke about how if the interest was there and given the conversation, questions we've been getting, the intrigue into community land trust as a model, we would see whether we could put on further webinars into the future. And in fact, that is what will be happening. So on March 18th, we will have a webinar on how to set up a community land trust. Uh, we will uh, uh, we will provide registration links soon on that, but pencil that in, March 8th, how to set up a community land trust. Great. Okay. So if folks have any questions as we enter into the presentation and conversation to follow, please use the Q&A function. You'll notice this again also as one of the sort of items you can toggle at the bottom of your screen. There is a Q&A function. You'll see a question mark with a box around it. Click on that, pull that up, and you will see you'll be able to ask questions into there, and that will allow us to, in an orderly way, move through questions asked by you all in the audience. Now we'll have a poll on where folks are at and the knowledge that has been built, the knowledge that you all have coming in terms of community land trusts. If that poll could be brought up. You haven't answered yet. There are two questions there before we show the results. I'll make one note as folks are wrapping up taking the poll. If you've just come in and are looking for the interpretation button, look to the bottom of your screen and you'll see that there is a globe. Click on that and you'll find the language of choice there. Okay. Well, now we'll move forward. As you can see, the results here. Thank you all for participating. This is very helpful for us in guiding this webinar series. Great. Thank you all for your participation on that. Okay, so to move on, I'm very excited to be introducing Brenda Torpy of the Champlain Housing Trust. Uh, I first came into contact with Brenda about, it might have been almost a year and a half ago now, as I was exploring pathways, possibilities, means of how we could scale up our community land trust in Waterbury, Connecticut, where we steward housing cooperatives. I came into contact with Brenda as uh, the Champlain Housing Trust really came to the top as what are our best examples in the country, in the Northeast, globally, in terms of community land trusts making a real impact. And so, to introduce Brenda, Brenda served as Burlington's director of housing for then Mayor Bernie Sanders and Vermont Housing Finance Agency's program and policy development director, and has over her 45 years of experience in the field that has included rural community organizing and development, advanced the community land trust model at the local, national, international levels. She established and then led the Champlain Housing Trust, CHT, the largest U.S. Community land trust. She led it for 29 years and was chair of the National Community Land Trust Network, a founding board member and officer of its successor, Grounded Solutions Network, as of which a number of you all have come into contact with or have seen us speak with staff from Grounded Solutions earlier in the series. And since 2005, she has helped to export the model of community land trust to England, Canada, Belgium, and France through direct technical assistance and trainings. Under her leadership with the Champlain Housing Trust, CHT received the 2008 UN World Habitat Award. Brenda was a Forward Foundation leader for a Changing World in 2001, is the co-president of the International Center for Community Land Trusts, and past member of the Boston Home Loan and Federal Reserve Bank's advisory committees and the Vermont Governor's Housing Council. Since 2021, Brenda is at TA CHT's leading consultant, working with cities and groups on community land trust development throughout the U.S. and abroad. I have to say, when I myself visited in Vermont, it was amazing to see the impact, the work that CHT has done over the decades into today. And so, with that, I'll introduce or bring on Brenda Torpy to present to us today.
Well, thank you, Alex. Whenever I hear that bio, I just feel 100 years old. So anyway, well, it's great to see you all tonight. It's hard to go to meetings at night and watch a screening, so hopefully it won't be too painful. I'm going to show you my screen, and I have this is a focus on how we manage, and briefly, you could say we manage the whole business because we do a variety of housing, but I know you want the focus on the shared equity home ownership, and we can delve in a little more to that. So give me a second to share. So someone let me know if you can all see that.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we're Northwest Vermont, and we serve the 3 counties up. You can see the Lake Champlain on the western edge. And so being county-wide, 3 counties, we have different markets now in our service area. We started out in Burlington. So we have urban, suburban, and it's a big area for Vermont. We have a third of the population. And the only real city, and that's only less than 50,000 people. So very, very rural. But in the city, we have the state's highest concentration of poverty, and that's in the city's Old North End neighborhood, which has been our target area from the beginning and still is. And adding to housing needs is we are a refugee resettlement area. We work a lot with organizations and around that. And then Vermont has just consistently, since I started, had a very high housing wage gap. And that makes really struggle for, especially for renters, and of course, hard to buy a home then. Um, and our economy is, it's service economy. We have a huge hospital. We have in the Burlington area colleges and universities. So it's that's kind of our economic market. So we are over 40 years old now, and so we have accumulated some homes. We have 3,000, a little more than 3,000 apartments now, 700 shared equity homes of all kinds, you'll see, condos and single family. And we have 30 commercial spaces. We do neighborhood needed spaces, either for nonprofits or if it's their stores on the first floor. So that just comes with the community development role. Our homeownership center has 5 different loan programs, and you'll see them later. So we have a lot of assets that we keep in trust for our community, 300 million. Our operating budget now is 30 million. And we just over 150 staff now. And I will say, since COVID started, we had to add a lot of social workers, which we used to just connect with social work organizations, but it wasn't sufficient to our need. And we've grown our development department. So a little growth just recently, but we weren't always big. And we started out in the city of Burlington with a very progressive government supporting our development. We developed as a separate nonprofit community land trust, classic with the board and representation, but always with the support of the city. And our start out, we had projects that were about to lose subsidy and displace people. We had in the Old North End, there was a lot of speculative action on our low-income neighborhood. And so we were really trying to stem the tide of gentrification there, improve the neighborhood without displacement. And then we needed a new vehicle for affordable housing, and the trust model we saw provided that as well. Mortgage rates were in the double digits then. And Vermont was experiencing its first sort of wave of that kind of gentrification. So our mission says clearly, lets the world know we are a community land trust, and we strengthen communities through the development and stewardship of permanently affordable homes and related assets. At the core, everything is tested against, is this an asset that will have value to the community, and is it our job to provide that as stewards? And then our vision is based on that as well, that it's only by providing a stock of permanently affordable homes could our region have, diversity and be inclusive and have the housing needed for all. So while a lot of what people know about us now, because they Google looking for trust, is we're big, and that's, but we've been at it 40 years, but our growth has been quite steady and always in response to need. We didn't grow for the sake of growth. That wasn't in our mission. But early on, we saw that the housing market for people wanting to buy homes was beyond just the city, that we had a lot of built-in suburbs around us, and they didn't have affordable housing. We needed to integrate that. And then we were asked to serve the 2 rural counties to the north because they didn't have any affordable housing. Those communities are too small. And so that is sort of our geographic growth, again, in response to need. And it redefines us. So we're very committed to our membership model, and it does change with growth. So I have a little bit about how we manage that because it's in our DNA. And we have to we have over 3,000 members, and they're not just residents, but also supporters. And our members have real governance responsibilities and rights. So it's important to keep them informed and engaged. If you're a member of the trust, you can serve on the board, you elect the board, but our members are the final vote to approve any bylaw changes, any changes to our resale formula, any disposition of assets like the sale of land or in a dissolution. So we have to rely on the membership in a governance role as well. And then we have the Classic Community Land Trust Board of Directors. I'll say one thing, so now it's 15, and we have 5 residents. We have 3 kinds of resident seats, a cooperative, homeowners, and renters. So we always make sure in that mix there has to be one of each, and then whatever as for the other, for the 5. And as board members, residents are residents, they're all the same. They have different contractual relationships with us in their housing, but that's separate. Our public seats, we reserve for local governments, and we always have 1 or 2 regional seats for all the small communities that couldn't have the capacity to send their own rep. And then we have non-resident members are just people who support us, and that's where we've been able to engage folks who can raise donations for us and work in the community on our behalf that way. So it's the classic CLT balanced representation. So a few ways that we engage our members at this size, that's of course comes up to us a lot. We have an annual meeting. We have now in person over 300 attendees, and now we have virtual access to the meeting and the voting, the meeting part itself. It's, it's a dinner and celebration. So you don't know the candidates like you do when you were smaller. And so we send out a notice early with bios of the people who want to run for the board. The residents elect their own board members, and then all members elect the other kinds of seats. So members still have that, as key stakeholders. And then we have some bylaw things that protect that too. We need super votes to do like changes to the formula, recommend that to the membership. And also a quorum has to have at least 1 of each kind of member. So we really keep that balance of representation in mind. Another big event in the summer is, again, with that same level of attendance, is a big picnic on the lakes, a lot of stuff for kids. And so this is the one that's just celebratory. And of course, we have our highest concentration, especially of renters in the city, but so we provide transportation. We do a lot of outreach to every part of we're all our sites everywhere, so that people who want to come can come free, as well. And then a real way we engage with members that kind of help people build into leadership and other roles is now, your home is in your neighborhood and your community. So at all our larger sites, we have a lot of programs for everybody. We have youth events, we have a youth mentoring program, we have health programs, community gardens. That's what every site wanted. We survey and people choose what's important to them. So we have a lot of community gardens, and then we just have socials, of course, and then people engage as volunteers on site. We don't do all these things for them, and that's how they get involved. And at the sites, sites have social workers, but they also have community builders, and that's the role. That's just to help bring our communities together and engage them in the trust. These are other kinds of community events. The point I want to make here is we don't just do our own things. We join in and support and contribute to neighborhood events everywhere. And of course, up in our rural area, it's like Dairy Day and Maple Fest. And so a good engagement with your wider service area, your other stakeholders, is really to join in and support them in their things. And then, of course, a very important role in membership. This is how we got started and has been all along the way: advocacy and civic action. We do, when there's something coming up, we do training for, talking to a legislator, and we help people and we transport people. Our folks have come out to fight NIMBYism in communities. So, and annually, we have a big trust fund that funds permanent affordability in Vermont, but we have to go every year and make sure the legislature doesn't move that money around. So, and we fill the state house every year. So that's the picture there on the left. And so that is an important and valuable thing. And again, we get leadership from that, people who really are supportive. So coming back then to how we manage all this, there's 2 principal activities for us, right? It's home ownership and multifamily housing. We have so many renters. But we need a lot of other departments to support that, right? So real estate development is what gets those properties into the, the trust with the funding. They need to be affordable. We have a community relations and our that's fundraising, outreach, education. So it goes between our members and bringing in new support. Resident services, I mentioned, there's all kinds of resident service. Some is really like social work, and a lot of it is just helping people to help each other. We have cooperative housing. You'll see that a small number of cooperative properties and owners, but important part of us. And then, of course, the finance department and our internal resources and admin. This is how we visualize our mission and vision. It's a continuum of housing, and we feel that people need that. If we have something, we don't have enough of it, but people do come into us homeless and move into the security of permanently affordable rentals. And then we really help people have the opportunity then to move to home ownership. And I'll show you how that happens. But it's really important. And we are a large provider of access to people around house. Vermont has a very high level of homelessness. It's a sign of our situation in the market. So we had to lean into that. Just how you manage the big territory. Our headquarters is in downtown Burlington, 88 King. And then we have sites, we'll have a property management office, the service providers will go there. And then we have a central maintenance shop. And some of those folks are driving, 40 miles, 50 miles to every day. And then we have big properties have on-site maintenance teams. And then on our on-site sites, we'll have special needs housing. We will have staff there. So that's kind of how we spread ourselves out. And you can't read this, I'll show you later, but just to show you that you do need be very attentive to management and having your layers of leadership. So staff, the people in the field always have someone to go to, always have a connection. So it's a departmental structure, and I'll see them in the next slide. But just broadly, it looks very hierarchical. You can't really be flat when you have so many people in the field. And so we have the 3 executives, then we have department heads, and then there's program directors, and they have teams who are the field people. We have specialists in departments that are one-ofs, of course, and then we have some cross-departmental ones, of course, like you have IT. But an interesting post we just created last year is safety. So we have so many properties that big properties need security on site of various or different kinds, and safety just covers all of that. So that was a job we would not have envisioned a while ago. So there's they are, our homeownership center. The big center of homeownership is our shared equity program. So within it, we call it shared equity. And I'll show you how they operate. And then there's property asset management, our resident services, our co-op have their own department, their own staff. It's a department, it's a staff of 1. And then specialized property managers who know how to work with co-ops. They have a management contract with us as well, and their own maintenance. So some of these I've noted already. One thing I'll note, and you saw it in the chart, your counting of finance grows very fast when you do affordable housing because there's so much compliance, and it's so balkanized, individualized. So for example, you have many agencies you're reporting to. You're reporting to HUD, you're reporting to Treasury, you're reporting to your state agencies. And all of that compliance has to be done the way they want it, you can't generalize it. And then the other thing we do with housing programs in this country is the big engine for building rental housing is low-income housing tax credit. And you have to make each of your sites its own entity. So with all of these rentals, if we could operate them as one, we'd be throwing off money to build new rentals. But instead of having one big gas bill for all our properties, every property has everything individually, like little companies. So this creates a lot of back office, a lot of compliance. It's also one of the challenges to scale, because it's not just the number of apartments you get, but if they're all individualized, you're still broken up and it takes more staffing. And the other point is in places like Vermont, some of you, I'm sure, are in rural. For years, we couldn't build more than 20 apartments anywhere. And these kinds of programs that require so much administration, it's too heavy. So some thoughts, we have been pushing smart growth in our whole sector of land trusts around the state. And so now people appreciate density in certain locations because we're saving land. Okay, so we'll start with homelessness. I know we'll get to the major point, but just to show you the various ways we serve the homeless and give you some sense of our territory here. I'll just show you a couple. This is one property we don't own at this point. We're doing this for the city of Burlington. That's in the target area of the Old North End, but they're little pods. And then there's a central, those portable pods. Very important in the winter in Vermont not to have anybody outside at night. And the shelters are scary for some people. You need different things because people have different needs. So that's been working very well. And then we do service enriched housing. And this is interesting. These are apartments for people who've just come out of homelessness. So when we can, we're trying to move people as quickly as we can into apartments. But then they need support. You come out of trauma homelessness, it's not one and done. And people have struggles, and sometimes those struggles stretch to bothering, your neighbors. So we have social work for both ends of that problem. But in this building, folks get an apartment, but we have all kinds of services on the ground floor. And people start accumulating, some furniture. We have a lot of donations and stuff. So this was a converted hotel. We started doing that just before COVID. And this is a domestic violence shelter. This was a nice new hotel that sold during COVID. So this is the other relationship, is when we can, a service provider is operating this for domestic violence, and we're helping them manage the building and qualifying folks for apartments there. So we have a lot of different rental housing, and we, 25% we take rent subsidies, so that really helps the properties. We have a lot of scattered site in the city, but we more and more, again, for a lot of reasons, we build where we can. We build some sizable properties. We have a few market rates because it's a function of a program. So it's nice to have that mix and where it works. And then we have a lot of services, economic services for our renters. Our goal is no economic evictions. So it's a high bar. So people can get into programs with us and pay back arrears and start building their budget savvy. And people do very well once they understand the financials. It's really interesting. So we do that. So on the waterfront, this one has some market homes because it's the only rental housing on the waterfront, and we got the bid. And it's a green building, the first of its kind in Vermont at the time. And people are right on the waterfront, where the condos next to them are over $1 million. They're very nice apartments, big, large family. This shows we have a different approach in rural. So these buildings were made more to fit into this. It's a suburb that's an outer suburb. So for fit, it's important. And what you see, the light building in the background on the right, as we gave some pads, which we do pretty regularly on sites, to Habitat for Humanity. So they build these very affordable homes and we have a couple of these duplexes there. So this is a mixed neighborhood. There's also, we sold a pad to a senior housing nonprofit, and there's a big, beautiful site for them. This is a new one going right downtown, a block and a half from City Hall, and it's fixing up a corner, and this will have apartments with some set aside for veterans and then a community center for veterans. They'll be pretty open anyway. So that's going to open this year. Here's our co-ops. We only have 125 units about, and then 6 sites. And only one of them is a true limited equity structure. It's the, oh, I'll show you the picture here. The one in the middle here has Section 8s, and it has a couple of low, moderate income, but unrestricted and low income. But all of our co-ops now, including this one, have there's zero equity co-ops, and they're very affordable. The other ones, we've built the one on the left is in the old North End Target area. We actually finance it because it's the only financing for multifamily at this affordability with this tax credit that's designed for rental. But then we master lease all the rights to a co-op, and they form their own board. And then they relate to us in 2 ways. They don't have to, but most of them take our property management and maintenance contract. And we're very specialized to work with them. And then they have an obligatory with their financing contract with us for technical assistance to the board and to the governance of the, so that way we can do their trainings and orientations. And should a board falter, once in a while you get high vacancy or something, then we're there to get it back up and running. And so they all operate quite well, and it's one TA provider. So this is shows you another mix. Again, this is apartments for folks coming out of recovery, and they want to be reunited with their family. So if you have an apartment, and these are sober apartments, and we have a service provider for them, so you can do this variety. So down to home ownership of our home ownership program. The center has also rehab programs. Now we have a landlord one, a mobile home purchase. We have one for farmers to provide better farm worker housing. That's a loan program. And then we do home buyer education and credit counseling for anybody in the community. That is not means tested, but of course, folks get mortgage ready, but they may not be able to mortgage the price of houses today. And so that's been another entry point to our CLT program, because we say, well, look at this, and maybe this is the way you want to get in. So people choose it. And we do a lot of orientation. Of course, we do a lot of like this orientation that people can log on from anywhere in our service area, or actually Vermont, because we provide some of these services to the other small land trusts in Vermont. And then we are building more homes for ownership, which was very hard in the day, but we're finding sources to do that. I'll show you some examples. So shared equity is the anchor and the biggest program in that home ownership center. And this is how our program is designed. People are required to have that pre-purchase education, and then to have a special orientation on the program so they understand what they're getting into. And we serve people up to 120%, but most of them are below 80%. That's our target. And the cap used to be 100%, because that's where that's at that point that people could start affording homes, but we had to up it just last year maybe, or the year before. And our formula is like this. We use a market appraisal formula, and people get 25% of that appreciation, but they get 100% of what they build up in their mortgage, and 100% of the value at sale of any capital improvement they make. We really want to support people in that. And then we use ground leases. We also use covenants. In a condo, you have to use a covenant because the condo has to own the land. So we use covenants, and we use the national standard lease or covenant. You can do a lot of variation within it, but there's certain basic things. And that would enable your bank that mortgages you to sell on the secondary market to Fannie or Freddie. But these are the big secondary market entities. But even if you don't, if your bank doesn't do that or doesn't, it really has given us a seal of approval that this is like any other. It took a long time. We were one of the pioneers, building the thing as we're going along. And it was hard to convince lenders until all this work's been done collectively, nationally, and by pioneers, so that you can point people to this, even if they're not going to sell on the mortgage, and they see the standard product and then it's recognized. So that has been a big boost to land trusts all over the country. And a lot of, we have lenders of every kind, title companies, credit unions, national banks, it's really opened up. And it's important to cultivate your partners locally in lending. That's one thing. No matter if, let's say you have Chase Bank and they do support this nationally, but your local loan originator would have to be familiarized and work with you. So I just emphasize this when people sometimes say, well, you're limiting their equity. Actually, people get everything right. They build on their mortgage. They're rewarded fully for capital improvements at value. It's only that inflation in the price. And um, we were always hot market, and then prices went up more than 30% in COVID. So people are doing well with our formula, and we check it like to see, are we still serving that same income band we started with? That's how we test if it's working. And when we started, we're serving people at about 70% median, and we still are on average. So if it went to, if suddenly we're only serving people at a higher income, that means we'd have to share less and the reverse. So we think it's very, very important in this economy, the way things still work, for people to get into this situation and start, not paying your landlord's mortgage, but paying your own mortgage. And then we have a special initiative. As I mentioned, we're a refugee resettlement. We have a lot of people of color, a lot of barriers to home ownership. So we have a special purpose program that gives them an additional grant over and above our typical. And, education and outreach and help. So this is something that's very dangerous under our current federal government, but it's been holding up, and I think it's important to do. So this shows you again the variation. The one on the bottom left is the first housing condo building we built from new construction. That was back before the crash. 60 condos, and half of them are CLT and half of them are just market. And they all sold really, really fast. So that was the first time that was tested, how people would feel about the mix. And then I love this is in the middle on the bottom. That's in a more rural suburb, and that's a prefab house that drove down Route 7 from Canada. A lot of our materials came. So materials are very expensive now. This is a recent new construction in Winooski. Winooski is the other old urban center. When people say Burlington Mills, all the mills were in Winooski across the river. And so these condos, we had a lot of BIPOC purchasers and our first users of that program. And they're in downtown next to really old mills and the center. And it's really helped that street. So this is our biggest project historically. It's not built out. That's a picture, but it's about half built out. And because it's on the waterfront, Burlington has a ordinance that says if you build any new thing in the city, 15% of the homes have to be permanently affordable. But on our waterfront, it's 25%. And that's not just because, of course, the waterfront would be exclusive, but because that's where we have more open land to build, because it's post-industrial, so it's just coming on. It was a factor in the gentrification of the North End, so put a damper on that. And then it's going to be a mix of market, it's rental and condos. We already have 76 rentals. We're about to finish and sell 40 condos, permanently affordable. And again, they're going to be at our price next to our homes cost about 40 to 60% of what the market costs now. We have so many in the portfolio that have resold. And then there's senior housing. And so it shows you over time, you can come into opportunities. This is the developer who assembled this and came to us and said, you're going to get all the affordable anyway. So we did it as a partnership. We conserved a lot of land. So this is another new one that we just finished in Shelburne. That was the site of our first motel for the homeless, and we bought another motel and moved people to that. It was a horrible building, it was falling down. This is one of our community centers. I realize I should go quicker through this tour thing. So, but this is in our target area. It was a school. Now it's got the refugee organization and lots of tremendous things. Everybody uses it. It was a great community project. And this is our first donated land. It's in a rural suburb, an edge suburb of Burlington. Just starting to build out there. Just to show you, so this is, countywide, you see the scattering, but you can see the concentration in Burlington. The orange is the highest concentrations. So builds up over time. People often ask about how we fund all this. So we use every source, but the state has created some sources. They have a trust fund. Our city has a trust fund. Our city has inclusionary zoning, and Vermont and Burlington have both passed laws saying all their public funding for affordable housing goes to nonprofits, to permanent affordability. That's trying to be eroded at the state level right now, but we're fighting for it. And then we raise money every single way. Our community, our members raise money. We have a major donor campaign. We have a community campaign and then we have two kinds of community campaigns. One to capture higher potential givers. And then our community campaign has always started as our membership drive. It just goes out to everyone. So you already heard about the World Habitat. I wanted to go back, and I'm sorry, I thought I had a slide to show it, but we can just talk about this. I'm just get on a better slide. Anyway, in our home ownership center, our deputy director is the head of shared equity home ownership, and there's 6 staff because we have about 30 resales a year, and we're very high touch to make sure people understand the program and everything's good. So we have 6 people. Some are selling and reselling homes and working on that side of it. We have stewardship of the homes, to make sure that people keep them up in maintenance. We have it's an oversight and supports for people to do that, grants or affordable loans when they can't keep up with repair. So a lot of services to our homeowners. We have post-purchase trainings in things that will help them. Now it's how to make a will or how to landscape to prove your home and its value, things like that. So there's a lot of attention. And then we have one of our credit counselors dedicated to our homeowners. And so if people have trouble and start getting in arrears, they know we'll help them. So people don't get deep into the path to foreclosure because we're in there a lot sooner. So there's a lot to do. Permanent affordability is not just about what you do at resale. It's how do you steward the properties, and with your homeowners, how do you support them for success? And this has shown up a lot of cities that had home buyer subsidy programs switched to making them permanent affordability, which makes a lot of sense. But when the cities administer them, they really have a lot of loss and difficulty because there's no connection to those buyers. They go to sell 15 years later and they're like, what? Why do I have to do this? But more and more municipalities are partnering with community land trusts for the stewardship, because when you're there for people and they see the value they've gotten and they've been able to jump in for so much less and they have value and support, then it might hurt a little at resale to see your neighbor getting twice as much, but we have a much better relations and the program works better and the homes are better preserved. The other thing about our market that's important in terms of that is our homeowners resell just like in the market. The average is 7 to 10 years. We don't have long-term owners. In the rural CLTs that we support around Vermont, people will stay. They buy a home and they stay. So then you have to really be sure they're maintaining it, because if they stay until they have to move out for age or something and the property's in really bad shape, your program will suffer, right? And they will get less. So that stewardship's very important, and you have to understand your market. We have now, wasn't like this for years when we started, but right now, half of our properties are condos. So people do not stay as long. It's the starter home. It's smaller, and people sometimes sell up a single family and move to condo when they're older. So it's, that's one of the reasons we have more turnover. And now we're building condos because of our smart growth. We don't want to sprawl out into the suburbs. They used to have 3-acre zoning, 5-acre zoning. Committees are trying to change that and use their land better and have people close to services and have walkable downtowns. So I think I can leave it there because I'm sure you'll have a lot of questions on the homeownership itself, and I don't want to take up time with a lot of other things. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much for the presentation. So we'll go through. I have a few
Stop
questions
sharing.
to ask, but to everyone here in the audience, again, there's the Q&A function. So if you have any questions, please put it into the Q&A function. Again, it's the box with a question mark within that box. Okay, so um, some things that came to mind are what were the scale and impact. It's really amazing and astounding to see. And I've seen a number of videos, but every time I just learn more. And so one thing that comes to mind is what are some challenges or barriers that you've encountered while managing a community land trust, particularly in the early days through different maybe
Yes.
thresholds of reaching scales.
Well, we had real challenges in the early days. Of course, we're trying to, on the homeownership side, it's because nobody, residential housing wasn't ever separated into land and house. And nothing worked. So the banks and the lenders and the realtors were organized against us, homeowners against the land trust, but they were realtors. So that side, on the homeownership side, it was a battle to get the program accepted and established. But our other mission, common to land trust, was to protect the Old North End neighborhood from displacement. And they were all renters. And we were competing with speculators who were putting money in the properties and they were just buying them and displacing people. And we didn't have the sources that were since created. We didn't have the state trust fund. So working on the neighborhood, and it's small scale. It's two-unit buildings, 3-unit buildings, 6-unit buildings is big rental. So we were buying them. We got a line of credit and we got some money and we were just rescuing them. And it got to the point that landlords who wanted the money but didn't want to displace long-term tenants would call us to go, you want to buy this one. So we assembled these scattered site rental buildings in horrible condition. And so we suddenly realized we're going to have to be property management. And we had planned on property management. We didn't have the scale, we need a lot of grant money to support that. And then the second stage of the challenge was, even for us now, we've assembled them by financing packages and repaired them into bigger projects, but they're still scattered site. And so if you build a new building, or even you have a moderately aged building, but it's one site, everything in it, you replace a stove, you replace something. But if you're managing scattered site in a neighborhood, old buildings, it's so costly. Your plow can't just go and plow. You got to go plow all these different sites. You can't standardize any of your repair stuff. It's really difficult, costly high-touch maintenance. And a lot of organizations come to us who, this is what they want to do. It's the important mission, protect these tenants maybe and convert to co-ops, which we tried. Our scattered site co-ops did not work. That's another story. You can sort of guess now why. They were putting people in charge of these small buildings that were in bad shape that we didn't have the money to repair. I just felt it was unfair to them. But anyway, So that neighborhood work is very hard. And we almost kind of collapsed under it because it's a lot of different capacities were needed, and we were still very small, and we had a little office right in the neighborhood, and people come and at one point these tenants picketed us for being bad landlords, and we weren't up to it. So building up because of the city support they wanted to do this the right way and make sure the residents were supported. They put money and supported us to build up that capacity. And then once the state had a trust fund, we had some true capital. And then that horrible program, no longer housing tax credit, which is the one that costs so much to administer and works better for big properties. That's why we assembled these. And we could at least get a lot of equity into them and bring them up.
So,
That's an early one.
so to that, how have the operations changed over time for managing the community land trust? Both, I mean, some of the legislative aspects
Yeah.
you've explained,
Yeah.
but it sounds like a lot of operational shifts. Are there more insight?
Yes, with growth, but growth when you're a small organization, and I always encourage how people like it's all on the job training for me. So looking back, you can't just keep adding people. Your structure has to change as you grow. And now you have to think very hard when what capacity can we afford and need to have here, but what should we be contracting out? What should we partner with someone else to do? Because some of these capacities are so costly and specific in their expertise. So I work with our small nonprofits in Vermont, our small land trusts, worked with a few of them now as a technical assistance. And if they lose one person, there's one person with each function, maybe it's really hard on the staff. It's hard on everybody. It's hard to keep going. And it's hard in the rural markets to hire these expertise. We can't pay, and you don't have a big pool of labor in commuting distance. So it's things to think about in growth. And today, with people being able to work remotely, but the other solution for us has been growth, not growth. And this is my mission with our smaller groups. If we don't, nobody wants to merge with the next county, So we're very small, it's beautiful in Vermont. But if you don't, and you both die, we're going to wind up with a state agency. You're going to lose your permanent affordability. You're going to lose your connection. So I have been preaching, and people get in trouble and they hire me. Find your partners, come together, make a bigger region, get to know those people. And all of our CLTs, I think of it as reverse engineering with many, many little groups, have now become sort of multi-county. With one county left, and they're managing well now, but they're smart enough to be looking ahead and saying, if this federal funding really goes askew and we can't get a new project, we should be looking for somebody. So this is very related to what you just asked, Alex, so I'll just add this one. So at one point, the city of Burlington and the state were very supportive of starting nonprofits, but in our area, we're all committed to permanent affordability. So while we were still concentrated, Burlington Community Land Trust, on community development in the city, which was this neighborhood and all its needs, they funded a new nonprofit to just do rental housing and integrate rental housing, which didn't exist, affordable rental as the suburbs. So they became real experts at this new rental financing program, and they built big, beautiful developments so that the suburban governments started to be less wary. They had this image of affordable housing. It was silly. And they built up a big portfolio of rentals. And then during it was the Bush era years, so it's early aughts, our state government was conservative, and they started just hounding the nonprofits. There's too many of you. Why there's just so many, cutting capacity funding. So here we were, the two of us in the same territory. And I started to see, anyway, we decided to merge. And because we were land trusted, we had a lot of support and members, and hard to undo. We were the surviving entity, but we doubled our portfolio. So that was the point where I had to learn, management. Oh, you need a different structure. and it was hard on both staffs for sure. But so we thought if we're going to go through it, all the suffering, we're going to create the infrastructure, the kind of organization that can grow and the jobs can grow, but there will be burnout jobs. And quick example, each organization was big enough that we really needed real HR. Small nonprofits never have that, personnel assistants and stuff. But together we could hire one. We had terrible IT because we were hiring these contractors. And then once we came together, we could have a person, and then we got rationalized all of that, which all these things makes people's jobs better. So while there's always a fear among staff of growth, I can honestly tell the story that you can really help your staff if you get to a scale where their jobs are not burnout, where they're actually getting salary and benefit, and they can take care of their families, health care, things that are not available to you when you're small. And so for us, the 3 counties is the right size. It's not just, they're very rural and different, but it's straight up the interstate to the border. When homes got real expensive in Burlington, people started shopping in St. Albans, which is like 25 miles away, and working in Burlington. Anyway, so you got to think about your region. Does it fit as a market? Does it fit as a funding core? And don't be afraid of scale for the sake of scale. Big is bad. When nonprofits merge, you're not acquiring somebody to get more money. You're not acquiring a property group to cut staff, because all of our deliverables are by people. There's no like stuff. And so don't be afraid of it. Keep it in your planning from the beginning. Who would we if we needed to? Who's out there that's like us? The co-ops had their own and mutual housing federation, another struggle for them. They could barely manage their little homes, and then they had the mutual. They came to us and said, well, you seem to have a close enough mission with residents on your board and everything. So I encourage people, as just your strategic planning, right from the beginning, have your boards comfortable with the idea that one of our solutions is partnering, and that could take many different forms. It doesn't have to be just this kind of merger. So
Thank you
help
for
each
that.
other.
That's very, yes, that's very, very insightful. And as you've been talking through those shifts, I'm wondering, are there recurring challenges? No matter sort of the shifts, the scaling, the the different scopes, the staffing up, are there
Yeah.
still through that recurring challenges, and what are those?
Yes. Well, for one thing, you outgrow your office space, and it's really helpful. I have to say, there's another thing. Now we're more used to remote working, and people team up different ways. But before all of that experience, those platforms, if you had to split up and have staff in another building, it was difficult. And you've had one place that was head office, then they were all, so thinking about that. And since COVID, we were one of the first employers to say, no, you have to come back to the office. Because we have so many people in the field that don't have the option of working from home. They're working with people day to day. Why should other people? Plus, then we realized, oh, things are happening a lot better. You go down in the hall and you don't have to wait and schedule a meeting or email. That synergy, the energy, and that's very much part of us. So we outgrew our building. It's quite sizable, 2 floors of offices, and so they're just keeping adding on there, just taking away parking and making it offices, and we're just keeping people as much as possible together. We always, from the beginning, we did 4 times a year, we bring all the staff together. From the merger, there's 80 people. Just the connection of staff is very important. And then people now have the option of working at home a couple of days a week, which really helps the family friendly side of our policies, but people are together. So the challenge of growth is keeping up the infrastructure that we talked about initially to fit that growth. And remember that there might be a time where, for example, property management department, the social workers worked within that department that we had when it was small. And eventually we grew with the services for the homeless and the special needs, and we grew, and they are now their own department. You see, so you always looking at the structure. You don't always replace the staff with just the same thing. You look at what's the need now and how do we share things around. So a lot of our problems are the same as the small groups. You can't, the cost of the housing and the lack of federal investment that we just shrinks all the time. And NIMBYism, which is, we have more success with that um, over time. We're kind of a known entity. They could look at our properties. We're not scary. Um, what are the other, as you grow, you always constantly, you start learning, it's constantly change. We have to, you're working with a government, a local government, and then the council changes and they're different. So where's the other community that would now you could cultivate, or how do you keep those relationships um, going, and how do we keep spreading ourselves sufficiently around the county? So some of the services we developed are really important to our more remote properties because those folks are isolated if they're elder. During COVID, we had that health program session. We, like they did things like, it wasn't the health care like medicine. It was bring them all iPads so they can Zoom their kids and their grandkids and keep them in touch. And so the scale, the travel at times, the geography, that's a constant, thing. It's a new factor as you grow. And then our connection, wanting to remain uh, driven by members and our board, having as you grow, making that meaningful. And so I started looking at membership structures like not like our land trust. It was very, around the activism in Burlington, but credit unions and uh, food co-op, things that were cooperative and had to engage their leadership with the people they serve and how they do that. So I was looking at those models.
You
Unions, unions, your shop needs to be unionized, but you're not going to get change laws unless you're affiliated with the large union.
Mm.
Um, so the other way that I think I want to mention the CLTs can have scale is build your networks from the beginning. Network and connect and work with your peers. Don't compete. And then in that way, you have a bigger voice, you have more capacities, and it's power.
And, and you've alluded to this a bit in the presentation. I know we've discussed this a bit, quite a bit before as well, but um, who could you talk a little bit more about who supported the community land trust
Sure.
in the area, and both at the
Yeah.
beginning and even and
Yeah.
now at this scale?
Yes. So when Bernie Sanders was elected mayor, it was really through organizing because it was a big issue then. Tenant organizations, low income neighborhood organizations, all the needs that the city government at that time didn't care about. And they came together. So Bernie gets elected, and we had this form of government in Burlington where every department had their own commission. So power was the mayor had no power. So with advice, he had a great collection of activists who were smart with him, suggested he could create a community development office that responded to him, and they started raising money. The community development office always raised its own things from grants from HUD. There were more grants then. That's when they started cutting HUD in the 80s. So I was hired as housing director. They had a community development, economic development director, but we all had this direct vision. What does the mayor want to do? He wants to help low-income people. And we need to raise money and get that money out to the people who it's for. And so when I said to him, okay, so what do you want me to do in housing? And he's like, go talk to the tenant association, go talk to the neighborhood, see what they want, see what they need. And in our research of how to protect this neighborhood, and he was very big on providing home ownership to low-income people. We discovered the community land trust, and thought this kind of fits. And it fit the ethic. The other thing Bernie did that lasts to this day is civic engagement, because he blew open the doors to City Hall. All these associations now had a say. We created neighborhood planning assemblies, which exist to this day, so that, because nobody ever knew what was going on in development, it was all the old boys developers, and so everything goes through them. And our community development office was funding all of that. And then they made the entitlement cities get a big HUD grant every year it's based on population. You get that lump sum. Community development money is quite flexible, unlike other programs. So we created citizen advisory for how that money gets spent, and people had to apply. And so all these things were based on that. And the community land just fit very well into that whole vision. And when we put the idea out, basement of the library, so many people came, people of all incomes, because folks who had grown up here, who were quite middle class, went, our kids couldn't buy a house now. It's like a real mix. And we hired an organizer and developed the idea. The city provided capacity money. And our city employee union, very unusual risk for pension fund. They invested that line of credit for us. We got a local bank. And so Bernie was interested in creating a lot of these programs to deliver to low-income folks, but not as city programs. So this model, but that's why we had so many nonprofits. But some of these, a lot of strength today, and a lot of these efforts have merged as well. So like there were a lot of programs for women, the advancement of women, women had a household, and these exist to this day. Women in employment, advancement, after school that was free, daycare that was subsidized, all these things that would help these low-income families, especially with single parent, thrive in opportunities for women. And that was by scaling who was the poorest which demographic was poorest, and it was women and women with children. And today would be people of color, and that's how you shift. So that community development office was his engine that we actually could get things done. And once we started the trust, for 25 years, we had this strong partnership with the city where they said, we're going to do improvements on the main street. You start looking at whatever you can do. It may be community property, it may be housing. And we became the community development arm for the city that was outside City Hall, but still working very closely with that community development office. And then these same folks, some of us worked for the city, but some others were just activists. We got all these ordinances passed to get a city trust fund. People tax themselves with trust fund, condo conversion protections for tenants. And there's a lot of stuff a city can't do in Vermont, has to go to legislature. So we had to get these approved. So we had very modest protections for tenants that we could, but there was no landlord tenant law in Vermont then either, so it was quite feudal. And so we supported the tenants organization and legal aid in the city. And it's pretty typical that cities have more of these capacities, but they won statewide legislation to protect tenants. And yeah, so that's why this membership and citizen engagement is so important to us, because we view it. Some people talk to me about we have to develop, that's what people need, and then there isn't time. And to me, it's not this nice add-on of getting people together and singing, kumbaya. It's about power. And if people don't understand the difference between the market and what you're doing and how that benefits them, why would they support you? And then when we go to the State House, the staff, we're chopped liver, we're like, they want to hear from the people, and our folks can speak. The major Montreal Daily's coming down in a couple of weeks to do they're sending a lot of people to do a story on us. And we have 7 or 8 homeowners lined up, and they speak French because they're from Africa, and they can tell them in French why this is valuable to their family and how it works. So don't think of it as an extra or an add-on. The other thing that comes from our start that we learned, because we're land trust, that we always had to have this mix of leaders on our board. We pay a lot of attention to our board, a lot of training, a lot of orientation. neutralize, it's not a bunch of housing heads talking jargon and people sitting there who have lived experience. It should be shared. Board meeting is made, it's very level. And that takes training and support for our board. We invest in our board because that leadership is so powerful for us. The connections directly to government, very good. And having folks who would never have been in the Old North End, for example, or, really understand what's going on and then really be powerful advocates to raise money or to go to the legislature with us. So I think the community land trust model, and this is from hindsight of experience, not the vision I had that I believed in. I thought it was good, but it's an amazing model that delivers benefit to people, but also builds important consciousness, collective consciousness that so they can advocate for themselves.
I think that relates to some of the questions from folks I see here. There's maybe these two questions can go together actually. Um, the first part is, were you able to present an economic value added incentive to get the community on board? And then
Ooh, that's
another
a
question,
brilliant question. Go ahead.
I, and and then actually maybe well, I'll say the second one too. How did you get the community realtors, investors, residents to eventually embrace the community land trust concept?
Okay, thanks. So the first question is that I'm glad you raised it because this was the 80s when the federal government, Reagan said, housing is a local issue and made it so. They cut HUD in half over that decade. And um, so local governments were scrambling. The housing problem is on your door. That's when we started to have homelessness. That's when the federal government threw everybody out of um, mental health institutions and without any support in the community, without any resources. So people were homeless, and so Vermont is socially quite liberal, but economically very conservative, very tight on that, and that's common. And um, we also had in Vermont, and a lot of them were our big supporters, the old style Republicans who were compassionate but economically, very fiscally conservative. And so our organizing created this. We had this great policy paper that showed how shared equity saves taxpayer money. If you're going to invest in housing, why would you give it away to somebody then? And we built the fiscal argument, and we had many allies on the very conservative front. And it wasn't it was compelling because it was true. Local government, state local government, they don't have a treasury. They can't just print more money. They have to balance their budget every year, go into such debt that they were in the state economically. So everybody's looking for solutions, and we had tapped into that. That's when people started creating things like inclusionary zoning, where you were building in the affordability from the developer's wealth, or a trust fund that you raised just for. And so this was a very compelling argument for local government. So that was one thing. And then the second, so that was that value add. So we say if we created the nonprofits are stewards of it, they take care of it. There's a leverage, and that was very, very strong case. And the second one was, how do we build? The realtors and oh my God.
Yeah, realtors, investors, how did they
Yeah.
come to
So
embrace?
this is our start. So really, until we had people in homes, you weren't going to convince anybody. And the realtors were painting this horrible picture that we were, taking the land because we're communists. And, that was still the Red Scare era. So, you know, so we have a state housing finance agency, as all states do. And one of their big products, the finance agency, is making mortgages affordable through these charitable bonds they sell. But banks originate. So you get it at a bank. So we went to them and said, you have a mission of affordable home ownership, and you should be embracing this new way. And if you will agree to mortgage something on a lease, all these banks that work with you are going to start thinking it's normal. And they did not want to. But we, this was Vermont. There's a lot of energy around doing things differently and preserving our land for things we want. We could tap into some things that were really there. But in Vermont, you own your home, you own the land. So that was culturally a challenge. So at the time, believe it or not, it seems like it's 100 years ago because we had 6 local banks in Vermont. So you knew the president. And one thing Bernie did was he organized a banking council, and the bankers were also afraid of this communist that they participated to build, and was building relationships. That's all it was. And we thought they could invest in community development, which they did. But this was a funny one. So what we did initially, the ground lease, would survive a foreclosure, right? That's the way it's a legal instrument, it's perpetual. But we said to our finance agency, okay, if we go, because we had such hubris that we would never go away. We said, if we go away and we're not there to cure foreclosure, and okay, you get it back, we'll lose that one. And so we had this, a lease that was really subpar to us, but we changed it once we had a portfolio back to the proper lease. And then we got this local banker, this really nice local community banker, to do them. It was one of those funny properties. It was hard to mortgage anyway, and there were 2 things on it. And anyway, we had a home. So he said, okay, our bank will do one. And we'll use the finance agency product. And then that family, a couple of years, so he's like, he got the ball rolling, and then they had to sort of by mission do it. And we started building up our little portfolio in the neighborhood. And anyway, but 4 or 5 years later, that family got into trouble. And we just went into the bank and said, that's okay, we'll take it back, we'll find housing for them, and we'll resell the home. And then it was sold. And the truth is, for banks, this is a much more secure way to help low-income buyers than the way they've been doing it. We have this model, as you know, has a 1% of the foreclosure that other market deals have. So we had to just build it up, and that's the value of being in a small place. Vermont's a small town, the whole thing. So we built up our acceptance through word of mouth. So then the realtors who used to be able to help someone buy a home with a veteran's mortgage or rural, our farmer's home or something, people couldn't do it anymore because the interest rates are in double digits. So, and a lot of realtors, they do like getting people into their first home, and, they're not evil people. So we started building up folks who were like, well, now we can help these same people, but we have to do it this way. And we just kept building. And what gave us our boost was we joined that National NeighborWorks Network, who were funding these home ownership credit counseling centers all over the country in the boom. And because we had so many buyers then, we needed capacity to do these orientations and to get staff and do credit counseling. And once we did that, and we'd invite realtors to participate in trainings, and so we built up a big cadre that way on that side. And then we had a couple of lawyers, again, small town lawyers or generalists, and they usually are tapped quite a bit to just help. Couple who said, we'll do your closings, we'll help your buyers. And it was very slow. So the first year we did 1 house, and then the second year we did 9 because it was a deal that was brokered with the community development office. And it just went from there. And the finance agency finally, they built a big business out of us. And they used to have a mortgage that was even more affordable if it was permanent affordability. Right now, that's the agency that's really trying to do away with permanent affordability, and it's really bad. So we're struggling there, but again, organizing and hang on, fight for it.
I think that relates a little bit to another question on some of our minds is what are the benefits of memberships in CLT networks? When we were running through your bio,
yes.
A number of networks were sort of alluded to. What benefits
Yes.
are in membership in those?
Well, we followed, some of you are in cooperatives or no cooperatives. There's one principle in the cooperatives of helping each other. I forget what's called. Cooperatives helping. Anyway, so from the beginning, we thought we're all like these oddballs. There were some out west. There were just a handful, and so from the beginning we were just doing mutual peer-to-peer, get on calls, phone them, and visit each other, and that evolved into a national CLT network, ultimately member run, and it made a big difference because we were creating some of the instruments we created then together and said we'll all use the same one are still the ones being used. And the Model Lease came out of that, but it was all driven by, because we didn't have a HUD, or there was nobody to come and show us, or plus there was no funding source for community land trust, there still isn't. So that was built in, and the land trust is very suited to save my neighborhood or save a small rural community, right? It's ideal. It takes a lot of trust, right, to build and to share land, and you're cooperatively owning land. But again, you can't do housing that way. So over the years, we've helped a lot of groups start land trusts. When we won the international award, people who came to study us, they went back and started land trusts, London, Brussels. It's incredible. And so then we built this cross current because they're adapting it in a different legal framework and stuff. And we realized that it's a long story. It's been a long trail, but we realized that that's again one of those tensions. If it's very suited, and a lot of land trusts like Save My Chinatown, there's 3 in Toronto to save neighborhoods. But now they help each other, and now there's a network, and then there's a Canadian CLT network. So I think it just dawned on me. We had a big social housing forum in Dublin, and we did I keynoted this section on land trust so people would see different models there. It's all different kinds of affordable housing. And it dawned on me, oh, well, scale will be networks, because I think we can't, most places where the model has gone to scale, people have not held on to things like membership, or, Vermont's it's turning out to seem fairly cohesive. People are very civic engaged, and it's not foreign to them to join something. And so, and I was one of the people you could see that believed in scale. I believe if we should get as much land out of the market as we can for housing, especially in food, and because, look at what we're getting on the other side. But it doesn't just work as a widget,
Yeah.
like a lot of things. I'll give you one example that's really, in Boston, they've had a municipally funded down payment assistance program for a long time, and they made it permanent affordability, probably in the 80s, like everyone was going to, how do we keep doing this? And so they run it, but they also provide the subsidies to Dudley Street neighborhood, CLT, which is very organized around the neighborhood and leadership development. Oh, Jason, who works at the National, he grew out of that, came out of there. And they're stewarding homes, and they're doing fine, and their homeowners are great. But the mayor just 2 years ago started a survey of what's wrong with their shared equity program across the city, because people are balking when they go to sell. They're not caring for the homes. And they learned that you need stewardship, because you're doing something different, and people are trading in something for something, and it's a shared ownership, and we have an interest in them. So while, the homeowner's taking the big risk, they're getting the mortgage, they're really it. We have an interest in making sure they keep up the home, because it's not going to be a good affordable home for the next buyer without it. So that was an example to me of, it's great to have scale, but you have to remember, how do you preserve the values, material and otherwise, of your mission. So yeah, I think the value of networks. And people often, the other thing I'll just say, Vermont groups are so small, they'd be like, I can't afford to give money to support our coalition, which gets millions of dollars for affordable housing every year. And I'm like, what's more important? You're not going to get that loan. You know, that's a big return on the dollar. So always think about that first. That's like paying yourself first when you're saving. You know, ally with the others who will enable you to go on. And also you get energy. I organized our CLTs, the ones that have the bigger ones, to form a partnership that we could raise money statewide for home ownership. Because, you know, there's no scale here. So we came together to do that. And then we just stayed together to help each other in policies, battles and stuff, or
I,
learn from each other. And you can learn from each other. We're not competing by space. The other great thing about a land trust, you have a service area. You can give your stuff away to anybody else. They're not going to be in your service area if you're worried about that. And they, you know, the other thing I'm worried about was if we were the only ones that survived, you know, you become some little pilot program, some little, you know, another quirky thing. So if you help your peers survive, you have more support. More people fight with you.
we only have about 2 minutes left, but I want
Okay,
to ask you one last question. Um, and
I'll talk less.
and uh, and maybe there's something that comes to mind because of the way this question is oriented. As someone who's been involved in this work and more than involved, been a leader in this work for so long and so many capacities in so many ways, is there something that you would consider to be a gold standard or best practice or set of best practices for managing and operating a CLT?
Do not neglect your board. And remember that people die, people get old, people change. Don't let vacancies happen. We steward built properties and we manage things. We have to manage the ship, the mission, and it won't go away. You know, you get your board turns over, there's nobody carrying the thread of why you're doing it this way, and they'll just go, well, that's hard. Let's do something easier. We have to remember that you're creating an entity that says it is hubris. We're perpetual. Well, then you better guard that the carrier of that. And one of the reasons for having land trusts outside of government is the change in governments. You couldn't, you know, it wouldn't be stable to have homeowners counting on. So, but then you have to take seriously that you've created this little constitution and it needs to be alive. And that happens with your board and ideally members. And then with staff too, in these small CLTs, one person leaves, they take it all with them, institutional memory. You have to embed these principles in your if you're written in your policies and your practices and your. So one of the things we've done for the CLTs in Vermont is given them those infrastructures because they will have one home ownership person. And then when they have a vacancy, we back them up and we do their deals from here. But so just think of preserving that because everything else, you know, there may be times where there's funding, there aren't funds to do new things. If you can care well for what you have, that stuff's valuable. You know, what people get from it is so valuable. So
Wonderful.
that's the one.
Well, thank you for sharing all of this with us. It's really more than a pleasure. It's been profoundly insightful. I'm sure many others feel the same way here who've attended today. For those who you didn't have your questions answered, these will be addressed in future webinars. I saw there was one question about how to start community
Oh,
land
yeah,
trust.
I saw that. Yeah.
And fortunately, we're going to have a whole other webinar in about a month where we can talk for a same period length of time about the ins and outs of that and the different contexts for doing so. So again, thank you to everyone who attended, and thank you to Brenda Torpy. I'm sure there'd be a huge round of applause if we were here in person. So thank you again.
I wish I could have seen all of your faces. So have a good night and success with all your work.
Thank you.